Welcome back, people, with another show on EGTV. It's your boy Egal, and we're here with another show. Today we got a special guest. Honestly, Ben Jacobs, thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy man, you got a busy schedule, and in the middle of the transfer window to help to come on and help me out. Really do appreciate it. How are you today, Ben?
I'm good. Just a few days to go, and I think all of us can get some sleep. Fans can work out who they've got until January, and journalists, managers, agents can all not relax necessarily, but everything will become clear. And I think at this stage of the window, that's what fans in particular want, clarity as to who they've got, at least for the first half of the season. So I'm looking forward to what I think is going to be a really busy end to the window, not necessarily for Arsenal comparative to other clubs, but it wouldn't remotely surprise me if we see 400 or 500 million spent still from Premier League clubs between now and when the window shuts.
Wow, 400 or 500 million. You know what? It's literally back to pre-COVID era with the spending that's happening, especially with Nottingham Forest and some of the other clubs. But before we get any further, guys, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the video. It's absolutely free. It helps out the channel out a lot. And also, when it comes to the actual poll in the comment section, is how many more signings do you think Arsenal will make? We'll get to that in a second. But you guys, let me know how many more signings do you think Arsenal will make? Will it be 0, 1, 2? Let me know in the comment section. And also, if you have any questions for Ben or myself, let us know throughout the show and I'll try to address them. First, Ben, let people know a little bit about yourself, man. How'd you get into football journalism? Isn't it difficult dealing with people being upset about transfers not happening or the impatience of the transfer window? How do you deal with that and how do you navigate everything?
Well, I think, first of all, journalists don't live off Twitter. So what you see on Twitter and the reaction, which tends to be polarizing and vocal, is not how we spend our day. I'm a broadcaster, a writer as well for CBS. So things get funneled through Twitter. And when you're a broadcaster, that's quite useful because obviously if 90% of what I do is in the live, analyzing and reacting to news, then it's quite nice sometimes to engage with fan bases directly, either via Twitter or on shows like this. And you get an opportunity to obviously explain things in a bit more context. And it always makes me laugh because if I was to write a 100-word article, people would whiz through it in 2 minutes and say, that was good, thanks for the information. But if I write a thread with 100 words, suddenly you're talking too much because everyone on Twitter and social media platforms wants a yes or no. And guess what? It's not the journalists that are unreliable. It's the transfer window in itself. Things change. So if you want to live the blow by blow, then you have to be prepared for positive and negative twists. And that's what I kind of love about the transfer window. You have that ability to chase a story and to follow it along. So I'm with CBS. We're based in America. We're the Champions League and Serie A rights holder and Europa League as well, as far as Arsenal are concerned. But hey, hopefully in a year's time, we'll be covering Arsenal in the Champions League again because of the great start you've had to the season. That is looking very likely, in my opinion, as well. And then prior to that, I was at beIN Sports a few years back and the BBC as well. And then in the kind of gap in my career, I've done consultancy as well around football departments, around strategic growth, brand development, communications, marketing, digital evolution as well, which is different perspectives. So what I liked about that is I was in the thick of it with football clubs, learning how, from their perspective, a transfer works, the window works, what the targets are, how you market a player, both for an incoming and an outgoing as well. So that's obviously given me a fair amount of good contacts. There's times when you can't use that information because historically you're perhaps under NDA or you're contracted to the club. But now I'm back as a journalist. I've been at CBS since last year. So this is a transfer window where I've been able to be a little bit more vocal, obviously, because the information I've procured has not been during periods when I've actually been working for certain organizations or football clubs. And really, I just got into football journalism because I love the idea of broadcasting. I was always too skinny, lanky, and talentless to ever become a footballer. I did actually play for Oadby Owls in Leicester.
Wow, really?
There was something called a Leicester City School of Excellence. And I went to one of their summer camps and I scored a penalty. And I thought, right, they're going to sign me because everyone said it was a good penalty and nothing ever materialized. I was
so you're a big football fan. Who do you support? Or
well,
you're always impartial?
No, what? I'm a Leicester fan. It says it openly in the bio. I got to cover when I was at beIN Sports the Premier League winning season and also the Champions League when we reached the quarterfinals and lost to Atleti and beat Sevilla. So born and bred, make no secret of the fact that I'm a Leicester City fan, but being a fan and being a journalist are two very different things. So you take off your fan hat. And I think most journalists that reveal their allegiance, particularly ones like me that have started in areas like football commentary, we all say the same thing, that if anything, you're harsher towards the club that you follow because you want to make it clear that you're not going with any bias. So instead, maybe there's an inadvertent extra bit of criticism towards the club that you actually support to make sure that the scales are kind of balanced. So I grew up in Leicester, family season ticket holders at Leicester for many, many years. I have early memories of, for example, that iconic Leicester Arsenal game with the Bergkamp hat-trick and that one finish in particular. And I think people forget that after Arsenal scored, Leicester went down the other end and equalised. So Arsenal see it as Bergkamp doing his thing, and Leicester fans remember that as the game where we just never gave up and got a late equaliser. So Leicester and Arsenal have had some good games. Arsenal have usually been on the right end of the score line, particularly when they've played at home. But that game lives long in the memory, and I remember it well. Let
me just shout out Never a Foul. Big up to them. As we can see here, they've rated the chat. My boys over there at Never the Foul. Shout out to them. Go subscribe to them also, of course, and hit the like button right now as you guys are here. We're currently on 34 likes. Get those likes up, people. Ben, I'm very happy with Arsenal state right now, and I'm usually a very positive Arsenal fan. So the first thing I'm looking at is, guys, Saliba and Saka need to be tied down because they forget about transfers in, transfers out. First thing I'm looking at is Saliba and Saka. And I think both of them have high potential. They're going to reach the top of the game eventually. And Saka has shown it already. Saliba's already showing it. So my question to you is, do you think there's going to be any movement on that before the end, before the end of the window, or Arsenal could technically announce it whenever? And also, could you possibly give us some insight on if there was ever an inkling that Saliba was ever going to leave? Because from a lot of French journalists, or should I say Get French Football, they're always hinting that he could be potentially leaving. So more like a two-part question.
Well, I think, first of all, Arsenal in no rush to get any business done with any individual player currently at the football club before the window shuts. That's not the priority. And obviously, both of them are integral at the moment. And Saliba has come back from Marseille and been phenomenal. And that's no real surprise to anybody that watched him over in France. So if we start with him, the situation earlier in the window was that he was very settled playing on loan. And I think that the feeling in a very split Marseille board is that they could have done more out of opportunism in the immediate aftermath and right at the beginning of the window to try and get him back there in some capacity. And Arsenal stuck to their guns, really, well aware of the phenomenal talent, and have integrated him extremely quickly into the football club. And from that perspective, it's job done, because as long as Saliba is playing and has a clear pathway at Arsenal, he's not going anywhere. But there was a period early in the window where Arteta had to convince Saliba that it was better for him to stay at Arsenal rather than go back to Marseille, where he had done tremendous. So that, I think, was when the situation was unclear. And at the time, and perhaps before Arsenal fans really got on board, and now he's become a kind of instant hit, almost like a cult figure. Everyone wants him to be playing. But I think heading into the season, maybe some Arsenal fans were talking more about White and Gabriel. And therefore, where does Saliba fit in? How often does he play? Is he going to develop? Is he the finished product? And maybe that's because you didn't see too much of him during his spell in France, whereas I had watched a fair amount and realized the talent, the composure, the progressiveness. He's a very modern kind of footballer that has a lot of different attributes that fit excellently into this Arsenal system. So it's no surprise to me that Arteta doesn't want to let him go. And as long as the player's convinced, and he is, as I understand it, he'll sign a new deal and be locked down at Arsenal. And if he's happy in playing at Arsenal, there's no reason to go back to France or anywhere else. So that's heading in a very positive direction. And with Saka, it's exactly the same thing, that he's untouchable as far as I'm aware, in terms of certainly now, this late in the window, any kind of bid. But I was asked the same question a month ago, 2 months ago, and I said exactly the same thing. And what you do with a player like Saka is you tie him down because he's settled and he's happy and it's the right football club. And you do that not because you're saying definitely not for sale in a year, 2 years, 3 years, but you're protecting the sell-on value. And still, if the right offer comes in the future, in the long term, who knows what will happen? We know that Manchester City are interested, but for now, untouchable. Obviously, nothing's going to happen this late in the window. But as I said before, I've said this throughout the whole of the window, that Arsenal see him as not for sale, as somebody that they will tie down. And there's complete player buy-in as well. So it's more about the terms. And those terms can take time, because it isn't only about money and length of contract. It's about the other little things, like, is there an exit clause under certain circumstances? If Arsenal don't qualify for the Champions League, if an offer comes in, is there a gentleman's agreement like there was with Wesley Fofana? It never ended up needing to be activated because he left a lot earlier for Chelsea. But the gentleman's agreement with Fofana was around a promise by all parties that if a reasonable offer came in, he'd be allowed to leave in 2023. So there might be some kind of back covering on the Saka side to give an out if something happens with Arsenal that means that there is a step up. And I don't mean step up, by the way, with any disrespect to Arsenal in terms of the club. I mean a step up specifically in a set season if Arsenal don't have something and another club do have something. And usually that would be Champions League football. And who knows what the clause is? Players are more savvy, though, with the clauses they put into contracts now. They're more predictive. So it can be things like, I can't get out after the first year, but if in the second year onwards you don't have Champions League football in any season, I'm allowed to leave, or I'm allowed to leave at a fair price. So there can be lots of caveats on both sides. But I think the short answer to your question is that Saliba, Saka, integral to Arsenal at the moment. Neither of them are obviously going anywhere in the next 4 days, and Arsenal are fully intent on tying them both down to the football club for as long as they possibly can.
That's amazing. But the thing is, obviously, I don't think a club the size of Arsenal would be keen to put in a sell-on clause or anything like that in a player. Obviously, it would have to be some sort of stipulations. I completely get that. Makes a lot of sense. Now, we've done a lot of business this window, and I just want to know what you think about some of the business. First, Gabriel Jesus. He's absolutely hit the ground running. He's been a wonderful signing, but there was inklings that if it wasn't for a visa issue, he could have gone to Real Madrid, or Chelsea were potentially going in for him. Tottenham were potentially going in for him, but those clubs seem to have distanced themselves from that potential move. Was there any potential that he could have been on another side of London playing for Chelsea or Tottenham? And could he have actually been playing for the European champions, Real Madrid? And are we lucky? And I know we're lucky to have him, but how close were those deals?
Well, I don't think anything was close except for Arsenal in the end. Of course, teams make inquiries. We know for sure that Chelsea tried a late hijack on the deal, but Gabriel Jesus was fully intent on being a focal point and getting regular game time and effectively being an automatic starter. And for all of Manchester City's success, due to their incomings and the depth that they have, that was never going to be the case if he stayed. And the honest truth is it would have been exactly the same at Real Madrid as well. So then Chelsea tried a sort of late speculative bid. They did the same with Richarlison as well. When I say speculative bid, I mean it wasn't formal. You make the inquiry, you get the lay of the land. It's often verbal, and then you walk away. And it was far too far advanced when Chelsea even made an inquiry. It's also, by the way, perfectly normal as well, just as a tactic to try and get a sense of what players are worth, because you might need that valuation when you go for your own like for like. And this is why the transfer window can be so complicated, because a club may only make the inquiry to see what is going to be accepted in order to then use that valuation as a yardstick for somebody else. So it's purely tactical. And then you go back to the target that you want and say, well, we could go in for Jesus at this price, so why are you charging that price? And that, again, tends to cloud the negotiations and isn't always known by fans when they hear these links. So Tottenham were interested in Jesus as well, and much earlier in the process. But again, what's the common ground here? You've got Tottenham with Harry Kane and Son and Kulusevski and so on, Richarlison, who would subsequently join. And then you've got Real Madrid, who have got a ton of depth as well, including the very possible Ballon d'Or winner in Karim Benzema. But Arsenal are different for two reasons. One, that Jesus knows Arteta. Two, that Arteta then used that relationship to sell him as a focal point and make it clear that this isn't just a signing that adds to Arsenal's depth. This is the main man. This is the star player. And Gabriel Jesus playing as that focal point, as that automatic starter, is not only beneficial to Arsenal, but the goals and the assists were always going to come. And that's been proven in the early part of the season. He's been phenomenal, especially against my side, Leicester, where he was all over the park. And Gabriel Jesus, who is firing and who is confident, is going to not only get minimum, and that's pessimistic in my opinion, 15 goals this season, but will be the difference between Arsenal qualifying for the Champions League and not, if he goes through the whole season fit, healthy, and in the kind of form that he's currently in. And let's not forget, he's only 25 years of age. So you probably get a minimum of 5 seasons out of him, or at least 3 at this kind of peak. So it's just a really smart signing for Arsenal at, in the end, a bargain price. And within the negotiations, the other thing just to add is that, as I reported right from the start, I actually think I was the first to also report about the verbal terms for this price being agreed. But I was pretty consistent that Manchester City wanted 55 to 60, and Arsenal felt that was way too high given that his contract was winding down. And then they knocked about 10 million off, and all in, if the add-ons are paid, it's about a 50 million deal. And Manchester City always wanted around about 90 million all in as a minimum, guaranteed, plus any add-ons for Sterling plus Jesus together. And both players ended up leaving for approximately the same kind of price, 45 to 50 million. Fees are always disputed. That's another thing that fans never quite get, that if you are the buyer, you want to put out there the lowest possible price. Why? Because you've got to go and do other business. If you're the seller, you want to put the highest possible price out there because you want to paint the fact that you're a tough negotiator. So when it's undisclosed, you often do get 2 different numbers and 2 different kinds of add-ons. But generally speaking, I think Arsenal got Jesus at a bargain fee. And if you gave his impact last season, even though that's only hypothetical, if you put the goals, even 12 to 15 goals into last season, then Arsenal would have finished above Spurs. So him alone and goals that he brings alone, regardless of anything else Arsenal do, I think makes it a great window, because I think single-handedly he will be the difference between Champions League and not Champions League. So then when you add Zinchenko and all the rest and any future business, it tells you what a good window Arsenal have had, and quite a contrast to January.
True. So what I was going to do is, just before we get into the more of the transfers, I was just going to read the super chat quickly. He had a quick question also about some of the stuff, but big up to you, my guy. He says, Egal, much love, G. Keep up the good work. I can't wait to collab. Definitely, we're going to have to collab very soon. I'm still in the building, my channel. I'm get a shout out. Of course, man. Shout out to you, my guy. And I think Diaby may also and Hudson-odoi are staying at Leverkusen. Yeah. There was rumors about us getting Diaby from Leverkusen, and even a rumor about Callum Hudson-odoi. Was there any legs to that? Just before we get into more of the outgoings.
Nothing Callum Hudson-odoi to Arsenal, but Hudson-odoi's gone on loan to Leverkusen, and people will put 2 and 2 together and say, does that free up Diaby? I'm not so sure, because Diaby has said that he wanted to determine his future earlier in the window and is now on record as saying he'll stay at Leverkusen, but you never know. We're in that madness phase. The challenge with Diaby is really the fee, and it looks like Leverkusen will hold out for anything between 40 and 50 million, which is quite a high price. Definitely on Arsenal's radar, but they didn't advance it. And had they wanted to do so, there was an opportunity earlier in the window to potentially progress. So they've clearly got other targets, and this is that stage of the window now where you have your A target, and it has to be an A target now, because time has passed to assess the squad and look at the chemistry. And what you don't want to do is bring in everybody in high volume. This is a problem Nottingham Forest might have, because they've made about 1 million signings, 18 to be exact. But when you sign early, fans love it. But if you sign too many too early, you miss that ability to look at what you've got and had last season and assess the chemistry. And then it is in the process of assessing that chemistry in your first few games that you then determine, do you want option A or option B? And the manager may genuinely not know until he's actually seen in practice how his side starts the season. So that is why teams move late. But now we're at the stage of the window where you have to say, okay, from all of that, here's my number 1. Do I need a backup? Or am I prepared to close the window without making any more signings?
Let's get into that, though. Before we go into any more of the outgoings, I want to get into the incomings, right? Potential incomings, right? Is there going to are we going to need to still shift out Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Hector Bellerin to bring in these players, or do you think Arsenal are ready and prepared to just spend whatever it takes to bring in a player without selling anymore?
Well, I don't think Arsenal have to do too many more outgoings to bring in one, but they still would like that clear out. And the names that you mentioned are there with their futures uncertain. We know that Bellerin wants to leave. It's just been a series of difficult negotiations for one or two. Pepe obviously is now sorted, at least as far as a loan is concerned. And then I think the big one as regards some of the incomings was Xhaka, who's made such a good start to the season that he'll now stay at Arsenal. But if you'd have asked me maybe 6 weeks ago, Xhaka was one of those where Arsenal was still deciding. And if they were to clear out another space in that area, that's when you might have seen Arsenal move a bit more decisively for, say, a Yéremy Tielemans, which is still, in theory, possible. But I feel like now, if Arsenal choose to go for Tielemans at the end of this window, rather than getting him on a free next summer, they will do so in a very reactive way, not a proactive way. So Arsenal have always felt that they're in control of the Tielemans situation, which means they can be proactive because they've known since January that the player would like to join.
Is it on? Is it off? Could the Tielemans deal still happen?
Well, there's no on or off. It's too simplistic to look at it that way. It's a series of moving parts. So Arsenal have been waiting on outgoings and they've been assessing their chemistry because they know they can turn to Tielemans at any point, but they don't really want to pay the 35 odd million, including add-ons, that Leicester wants. And Leicester want that fee because it's, broadly speaking, what they paid for Tielemans, and eventually there might be a compromise. Arsenal would probably have moved for Tielemans earlier if the fee was 20 to 25 million. They did go to intermediaries about a month ago, and they said that they would like to explore whether a fee is possible for under 25 million, 23 million, as I understand it, to be exact, but no movement since. And the reason why it's unfair to say it's on or not on is because at this stage, Arsenal, for me, will only move for Tielemans if, one, they feel that they can't just wait and then get him on a free in a year's time, or two, which is another key point, another club comes in for a bid. And this is the danger when you speak to a player in January, you do your due diligence, you get ahead in the race, you line up a move, then you not so much call, but assess. And why wouldn't Arsenal assess? Because they've brought in Vieira, they've brought in Zinchenko, who can play in midfield. They've got Granit Xhaka in really good form. So Tielemans is a luxury in terms of squad space at the moment, even though he has assets that I think would be very popular with Arsenal fans. So then on the one hand, you could wait and then use either January and or next summer to clean out a little bit and then add Tielemans and get him a steal for absolutely nothing. But when it drags on that long, what's going through Tielemans' head now? Brendan Rodgers has already said that he's unsettled. So if he feels that this Arsenal thing has dragged on too long and another club comes in late in the window, at that point, Arsenal have got a big decision to make and they have to be reactive. And by reactive, I mean their plan may be just to leave Tielemans and get him at a later date. But if another club comes in, they may be forced to enter into the race to get him. And that's where there's a worry that Liverpool need a midfielder and Newcastle are still tracking the player. And Manchester United haven't done anything, but they've been there in the background, just monitoring the situation. So I fully expect some bids to come in for Tielemans. And the question is whether Arsenal lead and get him for a price that they want, or whether they walk away because they're saying 30 million or more is too much for Tielemans, or whether they're actually forced, which is bizarre to say because this has all been in Arsenal's control throughout the window, other than agreeing a price. And then suddenly, if a Newcastle, if a Liverpool come in, they might have to go, yikes, we got no choice now. If we do still want the player, we're going to have to react to what another club has done. And that's why the end of the window tends to have a knock-on effect and be quite mad. So at the moment, nothing from Arsenal, no bid, but it's still not impossible that they'll put something in late. But if they do so, my feeling is it will be more because someone else makes the first move rather than Arsenal make the first move.
I'm seeing everyone in the chat just blowing it up with the name of the Ukrainian footballer. I forget how to pronounce his name properly, but the Ukrainian gentleman, they dubbed him the Ukrainian Neymar. Have you heard any links about this? Because I'm seeing that it's really popping off over the last couple of minutes. obviously we're live now, so you might have not been able to look into it too much.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't made too many inquiries, to be perfectly honest with you, but you're absolutely right that Mudryk is known as the Ukrainian Neymar. And Arsenal have been linked with him from Shakhtar Donetsk for probably about 2 weeks. And he won't be that well known across the footballing landscape. He's young, but a very exciting prospect. And obviously, if he joins Arsenal, people will end up saying that, oh, that's the young mystery winger. He's 21 years of age. He's from Ukraine as well as playing in Ukraine. And he's been tracked really since Dnipro. And the reason for that is because he's got good composure over the ball and pace. He's got excellent movement off the ball as well. And by the way, as well, he's already played for an Arsenal in the form of a loan spell with Arsenal Kiev. So he's joined an Arsenal once before as well.
The Russian version.
Precisely, yeah. And what I like about him is that not only is he versatile, and we hear that word a lot, but what do we mean specifically by versatile? Well, the answer is that he's comfortable on both sides. And I think that fits the Arsenal profile. He's got 2 pretty decent feet as well. And he'll obviously know Zinchenko well, and that might help in any kind of negotiations. As you say, if anything has broken on this specifically in the last few moments, then I'm at a disadvantage because I'm live talking to you. But what I do know is that for 2 weeks, this has been one name on Arsenal's radar. Whether or not they've advanced that in the last day or so, it remains to be seen. But it wouldn't at all surprise me because I do know that they've been tracking the player for the best part of August, but not in a sense of actually advancing or placing a bid, at least as I understand it, 24, 48 hours ago. But I would understand exactly why, because he fits the Arsenal profile with the pace, with the versatility, with the ability to move on both flanks. He's very composed on the ball. He's very progressive in his passing. He likes to cut inside and can do that from both flanks as well. So there's just a lot to like, and let's see how it develops.
Let's jump into another thing that's been popping up a lot today. Griezmann links. Honestly, I don't think there's much. I don't tend to believe when I see stuff like this. My first thing is like Griezmann once said he'll never join Arsenal, but hey, plans change. Reports are Arsenal adding interest. Came from CBS Sports.
I don't see this happening either. I think that Arsenal tried, didn't they, when Atleti signed Griezmann to enter the race, and they didn't succeed. The challenge with Griezmann is just that Atleti don't want to play him to the point where they trigger the transfer fee, which is 40 million euros. And Barcelona don't want to get stuck with Griezmann, which means that we might see something late window, whether a loan or otherwise. So it's one to watch. And that speaks to a variety of different teams who are perhaps looking for more of a short-term swoop for a 30-plus striker. So we're seeing it with Chelsea. We might see it with Manchester United. Any club linked with Ronaldo is obviously in the market again for like a proven goal scorer, but in their 30s. But it doesn't fit Arsenal's profile for me. I know he's not quite Aubameyang and 33, but he's 31 years of age, and he will want to be playing regularly and every week in a World Cup year. And Atleti can't give him that without paying the full transfer fee. So when you consider that Barcelona...
Sorry, let me just stop you there right now. I wanted to get into Aubameyang also. Since we're here, we might as well discuss it also. Do you think Aubameyang, former Arsenal captain, could leave Barcelona and join one of our Premier League rivals in Chelsea or Manchester United before the end of the window?
Not Manchester United. They're very much third in the pecking order of options, and the Manchester United interest is being sparked in Spain. And why? Because it puts pressure on Chelsea to get a deal done. So Aubameyang has got good options in the sense that Xavi wants to keep him at Barcelona. He only joined in January. So if he stays, nobody at Barca will be too disappointed. And if they don't bring in a Bernardo Silva, then they don't need that transfer fee as urgently as perhaps before. And then if he goes back to Chelsea, he's linking up with Thomas Tuchel, and he's very open to that move as well. So there's a few things that are important to stress here. One is that personal terms have not been fully agreed yet with Aubameyang as far as Chelsea are concerned. And two is that Barcelona are delaying on the negotiations. So there's two options or deals on the table. One is £15 million plus Marcos Alonso, and that's what Chelsea want to push through. And then two is a straight cash deal. And logistically, both deals are reasonably close, but Barcelona haven't signed off either because they've not 100% decided if they want Alonso yet. Alonso wants to make the move. And Chelsea have been very clever because the swap deal has a higher financial value than the cash deal. Why? Because again, the expectation at Chelsea's end is they are pushing Barcelona to accept the swap deal. Whereas if Barca say no to Alonso, then the dynamic changes. And then if Chelsea want Aubameyang, they're going to have to add a bit more money to the straight cash deal. But the mechanism, the logistics, the negotiation is basically there. But Barca haven't decided what they want. And Chelsea are kind of being made to play a waiting game. And the nagging doubt is that Aubameyang is not desperate to leave Barcelona, but is kind of open to a Chelsea move. So this is going to move, I think, in the next day or two. Everyone wants a little bit of clarity. We wait and see whether Barcelona U-turn and decide that they suddenly do want Alonso. Difficult to deal with Barcelona because there's a lot of moving parts, but Aubameyang to Chelsea is certainly more than possible. And the other thing, by the way, as an aside, is we wish Aubameyang well because he's had a very difficult 24 hours. He was obviously robbed in a very tough manner with his whole family there. And you just sort of feel like at this point in his headspace, let's just hope he's okay. His family are okay. And then the players at Barcelona have got a few days off. So I think what's going to happen is 24 hours are going to pass. Chelsea are going to exert pressure. Barca are either going to decide they want Alonso, or Chelsea are going to have to move an offer of between 18 and 20 million to more like 22 million. And then if Aubameyang agrees to the deal, that one will happen very quickly. And if it doesn't, then it becomes very interesting for Chelsea because who do they turn to? Could it be Zaha, vaguely linked with Arsenal? Could it be Ronaldo even, which would be a complete U-turn on the point of Thomas Tuchel? But Chelsea need a striker for sure. So the Aubameyang deal or those other names that I've mentioned are ones to watch between now and when the window shuts.
And these are some of the names that I wanted to talk about. The mystery winger situation at Arsenal. I wanted to ask you a little bit about this before we go anywhere. So I wanted to make this like its own segment. There is a plethora of names that are being linked to Arsenal. Pedro Neto for around 50 million. We have Marco Asensio, who could potentially be leaving Real Madrid. We've been hearing a lot about Yéremy Pino. We've been hearing about Gakpo all window. And lately, we've been hearing about Zaha. I just wanted to know, what is the state of this whole mystery winger situation? And is this very common that clubs have a mystery target for a position that nobody knows about throughout the whole window? Or is it just that they have so many different names that they don't want to say they have one name? It's just they're looking at a plethora of names.
No, it's the exact opposite. I mean, there's no mystery to Arsenal. They know exactly what they're doing. Mystery winger is just a nice way of saying that Arsenal do their business discreetly and secretively, much like Liverpool. And mystery winger sounds exciting in a headline, but the reality is the mystery is amongst the media. And we have to hold our hands up and admit that if there's a mystery winger, I've said it many times, I don't know who the name is. What I do know is some of the names that you just mentioned, Arsenal are moving for. But if we know that, and Neto is the best example, there's absolutely no mystery to it. So mystery winger gets everybody excited, gets everybody talking. But sometimes journalists just have to be honest and say, if we're calling it a mystery winger, then that is headline grabbing. And if we are in the reality of a window being frank with people that we talk to and engage with, then if you can't name the mystery winger, then why are you talking about the mystery winger? Because you don't know who the target is. And if you can name the mystery winger, why are you calling it a mystery winger? So from the names that you've mentioned, there is a few. And it's not just winger, by the way. So let's just take a step back. Arsenal want a creative-minded player. And that might be a wide player, so you could call them a winger. It might be a versatile player, so you can call them a wide-sided forward. It might be more like a Yuri Tielemans, a central attacking midfielder who is also creative-minded. But I think what they'd like to fill is that Rafinha-style profile. And make no mistake, Edu says retrospectively for PR, oh, I always knew that he was going to Barcelona, so we didn't move. That's nonsense. That's a football club, again, covering their tracks retrospectively because it is all about PR. Edu made 3 attempts for Rafinha before Barcelona bid and before Chelsea bid. And on the night that Chelsea bid, he was left in the dark by Deco, which tells you that they were seriously in the race for a number of weeks. And then, of course, they backed off. And at that point, it probably was clear to Edu that Barcelona were the front runners, but Arsenal seriously wanted Rafinha. So that's the profile. And then their priority towards the end of the window is Neto. But it's just such a difficult deal, even with Mendes maybe helping. Wolves don't want to sell. They want 50 plus million. And this isn't a Wesley Fofana style scenario where Neto's going to throw his toys out the pram. There's not enough time left in the window. So I think that if Arsenal could just pick without obstacle, then Neto would be the number one. But it's not that simple. And I would say at the time we're recording, unless Arsenal, which they haven't traditionally done in any window, pay well above the odds, they're not going to get Neto. So then you start looking at who else is available. Diaby, we've already discussed. I think the Arsenal interest in him is historical and hasn't really led to too much more. I think Asensio is interesting only because Real Madrid are trying to drive him out the club and the player seemingly wants to leave. At the time of recording, nothing tabled or bid from Arsenal, but will that change as they start to realise that Neto is not a possibility? And I've said before, and I'll repeat it, that at this stage of the window, if you've got 3 targets, you have to go aggressively for one because time is running out. So if they've put their time and energy on Neto, where do they now go after that? And at what point do they draw the line? And that's when maybe Asensio could be possible. And I'm talking very vaguely because at this point, they've not gone back in, but he is at least a player that might be available. And the other one is Zaha. And it wouldn't remotely surprise me if Chelsea don't get Aubameyang, if they go for Zaha. And then at that point, Arsenal go for Zaha. And I think it's going to need a bidding war because Crystal Palace don't want to sell Zaha. He's made a great start to the season. I think it's 3 goals in 3 games, 29 years of age, I believe. And he probably sees this as a real opportunity if the right suitor comes in to make that step up again. And I think in an Arsenal team or a Chelsea team, he'd be a good fit. Perhaps not the kind of player that excites fans in the same way as one or two of the other names, but proven Premier League goal scorer, creative influence, and a really good fit. So again, Arsenal haven't moved. They're not preparing a bid at this point. If anything, Chelsea are looking more seriously than Arsenal, but I would say he's on the radar. And what do we mean by on the radar? Because you hear this from journalists. I'm sure it makes you sick all the time when we say on the radar, monitoring, confident, interested. And the reason for that is because an agent may say interested, and then you're perfectly within your rights to report that. And the reason they may say that is to generate interest and, again, make a club like Chelsea panic. Monitoring or on the radar tends to be waiting until, in this case, the last few days of the window. And the club will often use that phrase because either 1, they've got another target in mind, or 2, they don't have to sign anyone, or 3, they're waiting until another window. But if another club comes in, as I explained with Tielemans, that's when they'll move. So it's almost a wait and see. It's a reactive approach. And I think that's the case with Zaha. The Arsenal at the moment are not proactively bidding. But if Chelsea enter the race, they may be forced to. But the big challenge with Zaha is Crystal Palace don't really want to sell. So it remains to be seen whether a deal can be done this late in the window. But I certainly wouldn't 100% discount it from Arsenal's point of view. But it's a relatively difficult one to get over the line. And the only saving grace with the Zaha deal is that the player is very open to a move. And ideally would like Champions League football, which again is why Chelsea probably stand a bit more of a chance. But, you know, again, it's so difficult to give you black and white at this stage of the window. And that's not me sitting on the fence, because if I weigh it up as Chelsea versus Arsenal, then I'll say Chelsea have got the advantage and Chelsea fans will report that, but it's out of context because Chelsea want Aubameyang. And if they get Aubameyang, they're probably not going to go for Zaha. And then can Arsenal capitalise upon that late in the window? So I would classify it as one to watch, but at the time of recording, there's nothing too advanced, but things have to change very fast during the window. And by the way, the final thing I would say, even though it's impossible now, is I'm surprised that either Newcastle or Arsenal did not enter the race more seriously for Paqueta, who I think is a great signing as far as West Ham United are concerned. And I think I was one of the first to report the Arsenal interest in Paqueta. They never advanced it. They went to the player side to see whether he was open to the move, and they were put off by the price. And again, I've reported many, many times, contrary to the grain of most reporting, that Paqueta was never available for 30 to 34 million. It was always a 50 plus million deal. And that's probably why Arsenal never moved, because they just didn't think that that was value.
Let me ask you some other quick fire questions. What about Yéremy Pino and Gakpo? What happened with them?
Well, I think Pino is not impossible at all. Gakpo, I've never really heard too much substance to Arsenal. Obviously, Manchester United were chasing. They've got Anthony now. I don't think they're going to come back in and try and get Gakpo. But you know what? Some Manchester United sources always spoke about both. But this, again, is a traditional briefing you get when they've got neither. Of course, they're going to tell you both, because they are literally chasing both. So I don't think that's got too much of a chance. Not impossible, though. It just depends with Arsenal whether they are going to be desperate to add, or whether if they don't get the right name, they're prepared to settle for nothing. And there is still a chance that Arsenal just end the window with nothing, which doesn't sound too exciting for fans. But you know what? The silver lining of a big fat zero is that Arteta's delighted with what he's got, which means you have to applaud the window rather than be disappointed that one more wasn't added. I think Pino's the interesting one. Might not be this window, but the Arsenal interest is concrete. It's just about timing. And the only...
I'll save that for the last question, because I know where you're about to go, and I just have two more players that I wanted to inquire about before we get to the final thing, is how many players you think Arsenal are going to sign. What about we've heard rumors to a Brighton midfielder, Moises Caicedo, and we've heard weak links of potentially going for Lazio midfielder Milinković-Savić. Do you think that was an area Arsenal were looking to address? And if they were, bar Tielemans, do you think Arsenal were ever going to go for those other names?
Milinković-Savić high in demand, but just such a difficult sale because the fee's so high. So there's nothing doing at the moment on that one, and it would take a big bid to change it. But a player certainly that Arsenal admire, might be one for a future window after more clear-outs in that area, but I think it's unlikely at this stage. Just finishing up on Pino as well, the opportunism to move now is on price. The release clause is 67.5 million, and Villarreal have got financial woes. So that's why a few clubs are considering whether they might be able to get him at a cut price deal. And then if they don't move now, it could still be a deal that's on the radar in the future because he's young. But what will the price be when you come back? So one to watch again, because the Arsenal interest has some substance, but they haven't bid yet. And time is running out, and it's still a lot of money to play for a young player. And then what was the other name that you asked me?
Moises Caicedo from Brighton.
Yeah, I don't see this one happening because I've spoken to a number of Premier League clubs. First of all, Brighton have made a great start to the season, and he's actually playing. I think it was only 8 Premier League appearances last season, and he's been involved in all their games so far this season. But as I understand it, there's issues in terms of how he's represented and visaed up. So it's quite a difficult deal to pull off. It's not an easy negotiation with the agent. It's not as simple as you might think to sign a player like Caicedo. And I think a few top clubs looked at him early in the window and realized just how difficult it was to pull the deal off. And also the agent that he's now represented by is a tough negotiator as well. So great player for sure, but I don't see that one happening to Arsenal.
Finally, the final question of the day. How many more signings do you think Arsenal would make if this was your own educated guess, of course?
Well, don't make educated guesses because you have to just follow the trend of the market. It's never helpful for journalists to create glib headlines saying they'll bring in 1, they'll bring in 2, they'll bring in 0. My opinion doesn't really matter. I'm paid to report as things move. Arsenal are looking for 1 more. That much we know. And if they weren't, then they wouldn't be having any conversations. They wouldn't be going to Wolves a few weeks back about Neto. They wouldn't be inquiring, loosely speaking, about players like Zaha. And they certainly wouldn't be in ongoing conversations with agents. They'd be having a cup of tea and they'd be looking at the Premier League table and they'd be delighted with their start to the season. So I think the aim is 1, and it may still be contingent on outgoings, but they're in a great position. They're in a Liverpool bracket now. If it's not the right player, they simply will not move. And that is a really strong position to be in. And it may also mean they buy young and for the future, because what you don't really want to do at the moment in this squad is particularly affect the chemistry. And in a weird way, if there is a silver lining, not having Champions League helps, because if you've got Champions League and say you're Liverpool, you have to buy, in my opinion, a midfielder now, because the depth is vital. Whereas Europa League, Arsenal are perhaps able to use some of the bit part players and the youngsters, and they're still confident of getting out the group. So you focus on the Premier League. And then if everything is going well, you don't want to disrupt that. And football works in mysterious ways. And one big name signing, one new winger, a Tielemans, anything can rock the boat. So if the right name comes, they'll move. And I think in a perfect world, and Neto probably is the perfect world, they would say, yeah, we want one, we want Neto, done. Because Neto's a bit improbable, they could turn to a creative midfielder, a Tielemans, a Zaha, but I don't see them doing more than one signing unless they get one and then a young player for the future.
There you go. Honestly, Ben, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the channel. Guys, don't forget to hit that like button if you haven't already hit it on the way out. We're at 107 likes. I know you got to go, so thank you for coming on, Ben. I'm just going to wrap it up here. You guys have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day, guys. You can catch me on the terrace at 6 o'clock. I'll be there. You guys know where to catch Ben. Ben's Twitter. You want to shout out your Twitter quickly?
Yeah, at Jacobs Ben, and then the CBS handle is CBS Sports Golazo, Golazo, CBS Sports Golazo. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
There you go. You guys have yourselves a wonderful day, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And I'll catch you guys on the flip side very, very soon. Only a couple more days left of the transfer business. And what do you do outside of the window, by the way? Do you just continue to find transfer stories, or do you do other things outside of that?
No, I mean, the day-to-day of CBS is reporting on site and during live games for Champions League and Serie A, for which we're the rights holders. Funny thing again is people look at Twitter and they think somehow transfers is bread and butter, but that's not what we do at CBS. Our main things are live rights. So my year is framed around Champions League and Serie A coverage, reporting, and then I was at the Champions League final, which was great, and a few other games. But during the window, we obviously try and keep across the transfers as well. But certainly won't be short of work once the transfer window closes.
There you go. Busy man. Hopefully we have you again in the January window. You have yourself a wonderful day, Ben, and big up everybody. Peace.